coming of the new year 47 AC found King Maegor Targaryen still without an heir. Not even a bastard who he might legitimize, which was extremely unusual and set many to whispering. Nor did it seem like Queen Tyanna of Pentos would give him the heir he desired, despite much effort on the king's part to make it happen. After each moon turned, the king's interest in his wife began to lessen, and while she still continued to serve Maegor as a mistress of whispers, eventually the king would no longer share her bed. He decided it was past time for him to take a new wife, one that would give him the heir he so desperately wanted. Legally speaking, without a child of his own, his current heir was his elder brother's youngest and last surviving son, Prince Jaehaerys. The risk was, all the time Jaehaerys was his heir, and beyond Maegor's direct control, he could become a banner for his many enemies to rally to. Thus, Maegor's counsellors all agreed that he needed a new wife, but parted ways on who that woman should be. Grand Maester Benefer suggests a match with the proud and beautiful Lady Starfall Clarissa Dane, in the hopes of detaching her lands and house from Dorne. Lord Ultram Butterwell, Master of Coin, offered his own widowed sister, a stout woman, but with 7 healthy and strong children. Though admittedly no beauty, he argued her fertility had been proven beyond a doubt. The king's hand, Lord Edwell Celtigar, had 2 young maiden daughters, 13 and 12 years of age respectively. House Celtigar were also descended from old Valyria, like House Velaryon and House Targaryen, so in Celtigar's view, the match made sense. He urged the king to take his pick of them, or marry both if he preferred. Lord Velaryon of Driftmark advised Maegor to send for his niece, Rhaena, the widow of Aegon the Uncrowned. By taking her to wife, Maegor could unite their claims, preventing any fresh rebellion from gathering around her, and acquire hostages against plots her mother, Queen Alyssa Velaryon, might foment, using her own son Jaehaerys. Maegor was known to be a difficult man to advise, more so after the loss of his mother, Dowager Queen Visenya, who seemed to be the only person the king truly listened to. But on this occasion, King Maegor listened to each man in turn, though in the end he scorned most of the women they put forward. But some of the reasons and arguments his advisors put forward took root in him, and he formed an ambitious plan. He would have a woman of proven fertility, he decided, but not Butterwell's fat and homely sister. He would take more than one wife, as Lord Celtigar had urged. 2 wives would double his chances of getting a son. 3 wives would triple it, he reasoned, and one of those wives should surely be his niece. There was wisdom in Lord Velaryon's counsel. Queen Alyssa and her 2 younger children remained in hiding. At the time, they had believed they had crossed the narrow sea to Tyrosh or perhaps Volantis or one of the 3 cities, but they still represented a threat to Maegor's crown and any son he might father. Taking Aenys' daughter to wife would weaken any claims put forward by her younger siblings, in some regard at least. After the death of Aegon the Uncrowned and her flight to Fair Isle, Rhaena Targaryen had acted quickly to protect her young twin daughters, Arya and Rhaella. If Prince Aegon had truly been the king, his eldest daughter Arya stood to be his heir, and might therefore claim to be the rightful queen of the 7 kingdoms. But there was 2 issues at play here. It is highly debated, even by allies of Rhaena, whether Aegon the Uncrowned was truly a king, given he only claimed the crown. He never had a coronation or sat the Iron Throne. He was never recognised uncontested as king. Plus, Arya and her sister Rhaella were barely 1 year old, and many would hold their gender against them when it came to any claim to the throne. Rhaena knew all of this, and to make such claims would be tantamount to condemning them to death. Instead, she dyed their hair, changed their names, and sent them away from her, entrusting them to certain powerful allies who would see them fostered in good homes by worthy men who would have no inkling of their true identities. Even their mother must not know where the girls were going, the princess insisted. What she did not know, she could not reveal, even under torture. The sad truth of the matter was no such escape was possible for Rhaena Targaryen herself, and fate was looming. It was only a matter of time. Though she could change her name, dye her hair, and garb herself in a tavern wench's rough spun or robes of a scepter, There was no disguising her dragon, Dreamfire. Dreamfire was a slender, pale blue she-dragon with silvery markings who had already produced 2 clutches of dragon eggs, and Rhaena had been riding her since the age of 12. Dragons are not easily hidden. Instead, the princess took them both as far from Maegor as she possibly could, to Fair Isle in the Sunset Sea, where Mark Farman granted her the hospitality of Fair Castle, with its tall white towers rising high above the Sunset Sea. And there she rested, reading, praying, wondering how long she would be given before her uncle sent for her. Rhaena never doubted that he would, she said afterwards. It was a question of when, not if. She was too much of a powerful political tool. The summons came sooner than she would have liked it to, though not as soon as she feared it could have been. There was no question of defying him. That would only bring down the king's wrath on Fair Isle with Balerion. Rhaena had grown fond of Lord Farman, and supposedly more than fond of his second son, Andro. She would not repay their kindness with fire and blood. She mounted Dreamfire and flew to the Red Keep, where she learned that she must marry her uncle, her husband's killer. And there as well, Rhaena met her fellow brides, for this was to be a triple wedding. The 3 women Maegor the Cruel married would become known collectively as the Black Brides. Lady Jeyne of House Westerling had been married to Lord Alyn Tarbak, who died with Prince Aegon in the battle beneath the God's Eye. A few months later, she had given her late husband a posthumous son. She was tall and slender, with long brown hair. Lady Jeyne was being courted by a younger son of the Lord of Casterly Rock when Maegor sent for her, but this meant very little unless to the king. More troubling was the case of Lady Elinor of House Costayne, the wife of Sir Theo Bolling, a landed knight who had fought for the king in his last campaign against the Poorfellows. Though only 19, Lady Elinor had already given Bolling 3 sons when the king's eye fell upon her. The youngest boy was still at her breast when Sir Theo was arrested by the King's Guard and charged with conspiring with Queen Alyssa to murder the king and place the boy Jaehaerys on the Iron Throne. Though Bolling protested his innocence, he was found guilty and beheaded the same day. King Maegor gave his widow 7 days to mourn in honour of the gods, then summoned her to tell her they would marry. At the town of Stony Sept, in the Riverlands, Septon Moon, the Septon of the True Faithful, denounced King Maegor's wedding plans, and hundreds of small folk cheered rabidly, but few others dared to raise their voices against the king. The true High Septon, in Old Town, took ship, sailing to King's Landing to perform the marriage rites, while many condemned him for doing so. On a warm spring day, Maegor Targaryen took 3 wives in the wards of the Red Keep. That each of his new queens was garbed and cloaked in the colours of their father's house. The people of King's Landing called them the Black Brides, for all 3 were widows and had an air of sadness around them. The presence of Lady Jeyne's sons and Lady Eleanor's 3 boys at the wedding ensured that they would play their parts in the ceremony. There were many who expected a show of defiance from Princess Rhaena. Such hopes were quelled when Queen Tyanna appeared, escorting 2 young girls with silver hair and purple eyes, clad in the red and black of House Targaryen. "You were foolish to think you could hide them from me," Tyanna told the princess. Rhaena bowed her head and spoke her vows in a voice as cold as ice. Many queer and contradictory stories are told of the night that followed, and with the passage of so many years, it's become difficult to separate truth from the legend. Did the 3 black brides share a single bed, as some claim? This seems unlikely. Did Maegor visit all 3 women during the night and consummate all 3 unions? Perhaps he did. Did Princess Rhaena attempt to kill the king with a dagger concealed beneath her pillow, as she later claimed? Did Elinor Costayne scratch the king's back to bloody ribbons as they coupled? Did Jeyne Westerling drink the fertility potion that Queen Tyanna supposedly had brought her, or throw it in the older woman's face? Was such a potion ever mixed or offered? The first account of it does not appear until well into the reign of King Jaehaerys, 20 years after both women were dead. This we know. In the aftermath of the wedding, Maegor declared Rhaena's daughter Arya his lawful heir until such a time as the gods granted him a son, while sending her twin sister Rhaella to Old Town to be raised as a scepter. His nephew Jaehaerys, the rightful heir by all laws of the 7 kingdoms, was expressly disinherited in the same decree. Queen Jeyne's son was confirmed as Lord of Tarbeck Hall and sent to Casterly Rock to be raised as a ward of Lord Lyman Lannister. Queen Eleanor's eldest boys were similarly disposed of, one to the Eyrie and one to Highgarden. The Queen's youngest babe was turned over to a wet nurse, as the King found the Queen's nursing irksome. Half a year later, Edward Celtigar, the Hand of the King, announced that Jeyne was with child. Hardly had her belly begun to swell when the King himself revealed that Queen Elinor was also pregnant. Maegor showered both women with gifts and honours, and granted new lands and offices to their fathers, brothers and uncles, but his joys proved to be short-lived. 3 months before she was due, Queen Jeyne brought to bed by a sudden onset of labour pains, and was delivered a stillborn child as monstrous as the one Alys Harroway had once birthed, a legless and armless creature possessed of both male and female genitalia. Nor did the mother long survive the child. Maegor was a cursed man, men said. He had slain his nephew, made war against the faith and the High Septon, defied the gods, committed murder and incest, adultery and rape. His privy parts were poisoned, his seed full of worms. The gods would never grant him a living son, or so the whispers ran. Maegor himself settled on a different explanation, and Sir Owen Bush and Sir Melodon Moore seized Queen Tyanna and delivered her to the dungeons. There, the Pentoshi Queen made a full confession, even as the King's torturers readied their implements. She had poisoned Jeyne Westerling's child in the womb, just as she had Alys Harroway's. It would be the same with Elinor Costayne's whelp, she promised. It is said that the King slew her himself, cutting out her heart with black fire and feeding it to his dogs. But even in death, Tyanna at the Tower had her revenge, for it came to pass just as she had promised. The moon turned and turned again, and in the black of night Queen Elinor too was delivered a malformed and stillborn child, an eyeless boy born with rudimentary wings. We can never truly know if Queen Tyanna was to blame for the woes of Maegor. Some argued that she was responsible for the stillbirth out of jealousy, others that she knew regardless of her defense, or the truth, Maegor would have her tortured and her death long and suffering regardless, that she falsely confessed to save her own torment. We can never know the truth for certain.